Students, hi, this is Mr. Bob. I wanted to give you a few pointers on how to use Logger Pro, especially if you're using it in combination with Vernier equipment to gather data for your IA. So here I am in Logger Pro. In this particular case, I have a motion detector connected to it, and the software has picked it up. But I just want to make sure you know that if for some reason the software does not detect the device that you have connected to it, go over here to Experiment. And if you go to Set up Sensors, Show All Interfaces, you can get something that looks like this, in case you can see it's detected. The other trick I found is if you are having trouble, just shut down the program and start it back up, and 9 times out of 10 that fixes any issues. So here we are. I'm going to tell you, if you're using a motion sensor, that 99.9% of the time you want to ignore this velocity time graph. So you can just kind of click on it down here and delete it, and you can make this position time graph bigger. And also, I would ignore these tables where they've calculated velocity, because really, for most IAs that we're talking about here, you're going to want to basically take just the position time data and then do whatever you want with it. So, for example, I've got this motion sensor here. You don't see this, but I'm just going to move my hand up and down in front of it. Notice I'm just kind of moving it up and down. I get a bunch of data. So what I would want to do here is I would want to examine this data, and then let's say there's a certain section I really like. Don't care so much about the graph that's created here. Here, what I really want you to do is look at the data set. I mean, use the graph to kind of figure out which data points are of interest. But then let's say I'm really interested in between 2 and 3 seconds. So I would go down here and I would grab all of the data from 2 all the way down here. I might even go a little bit further down here. I would basically highlight this data. You see what I'm doing there on the left? And I would hit Control-C, copy, or Command-C if you're on a Mac. And then I would go to a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet that I've opened up. Notice I've got one here, and you should have created this ahead of time. And I would just then paste. And this could be, I could insert row above, and I could call this trial 1 of whatever data. This is time in seconds. This is position meters. By the way, one other thing just to emphasize, this is way too precise, right? The detector, even though it gives you this many digits, doesn't mean that it's that precise. So you want to always go back to the website and kind of take a look at what is the actual precision of the instrument, what uncertainty is there. So anyway, you could do that, and then you could basically go ahead and go back here, collect another set of data. Notice I can do that again, and I might say this time, okay, I want to look at between 3 and 4 seconds. This looks really interesting. And so I could just go down here, again, one more time. Let's just say it's 3.5 to 4 seconds, like something like that. Control-C, go over to my spreadsheet, and this doesn't look very nice, but obviously you could make it look a lot nicer, and you will, et cetera, et cetera. Another aspect of Logger Pro that I want you to be familiar with, that you might have to change the settings on, is how long you collect data and how many samples per second. So if you go over here to Experiment, notice I have a temperature probe set up here, but this works for just about any sensor. If you go down here in the Experiment menu, go down here to where it says Data Collection, click there. Notice I get this window, and I have a lot of different things. Usually the mode that I use is time-based. I'm not sure you'll need any of those other ones. But duration is basically how long do you want the sensor to take data for. So for example, right now it's set for 180 seconds. So that's, what is that? That's 3 minutes, right? You could change it. You could make it 140 minutes, 240 seconds. You could make it shorter, okay? And then down here is the sampling rate. Notice right now, usually the default sampling rate for things like a temperature probe is 2 samples a second. For something like a motion detector, I think it's set at 20 samples per second, which is 0.05 seconds. So the default settings usually are pretty good, but if you're having trouble, if you want to mess with that a little bit or experiment with that a little bit, you can just change that, right? You can make it 5 samples a second. Notice now it's 0.2 seconds per sample. And notice it tells you, go temp, I can collect no faster than 2 samples per second. Okay. Oh, I see. So it's telling me that there's a limit there with the go temp. So anyway, those are things you should be aware of. And so the other thing I want to show you is if there's a certain section that you want to narrow in on, there's a really neat feature that Logger Pro has. Also, this is easy to kind of shift the units on the axes. So let's say I'm just interested in this little section from 3.2 to about 3.5. I can go from here, I can just paint out a little box. So notice Notice how I'm painted out that box. It's darker. There's a light gray big box, but there's a darker gray smaller box. And if I go to that, and then I basically zoom in, do you see up here where I'm zooming in? Boom, it just zoomed in, it just changed the scales, and I can really take a closer look at the shape of the graph. And then obviously I can go over here and it corresponds to a certain time period over here that I'm looking at on the table. So that's just another way, helpful way for you to kind of zoom in and zoom out. And you can also zoom out, as you can see, I just zoomed back out. The other thing you can do, there are points where you can examine points. You can see here, I just clicked on this little examine button up here. But again, I don't really want to show you too much functionality in Logger Pro, because in reality what you can do is you can just copy and paste the raw data, which is what you're going to want to do most of the time. Copy and paste the raw data of interest into a Google Sheet and work it from there. Software that creates some more functionality in terms of graphing. If you get to the point where you want to graph stuff and you want error bars in 2 dimensions, that might be something we talk about a little bit later on in a separate video. Okay, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you have fun doing this.